Graduation day was supposed to mean something, a milestone, a marker, a fresh start. But for me, it was just another reason to pretend I was fine. The gymnasium at Port Credit Secondary was filled with noise-cheering families, camera shutters, awkward hugs. All around me, people were creating memories they'd post-print and keep forever. Meanwhile, I was sitting in my '04 Honda Civic at the far edge of the parking lot, trying to keep my fries from going cold too fast and ignoring the knot in my chest. My cap and gown were bunched up on the passenger seat, half crushed between my backpack and an old hoodie. I hadn't even opened the diploma folder yet. It just sat there in my lap, a symbol of something I'd earned but didn't know how to celebrate. A week ago, I sent 3 invites. One to my dad's last known address in Kelowna, returned unopened. One to the rehab center in Surrey, where my mom was supposed to be, but no one ever confirmed if she got it. And the last one to my brother Liam, who had texted back with a thumbs-up emoji and nothing else. I didn't even ask if he was coming. I knew better. I'd walked across that stage earlier that day without expecting to see anyone in the bleachers. No surprise hugs, no family photo after. Just a half smile for the photographer, then straight to the bathroom to change and slip out the side door before anyone noticed. I didn't want pity. I just wanted quiet. A burger, some space, and to disappear for a while. I chose a corner of the school parking lot where no one would park unless they were trying to sneak a smoke. I had my food, my music low in the background, and the comforting numbness of being alone familiar, if nothing else. Every so often, I'd glance through the fogging windshield at the groups of families laughing, some already walking toward their SUVs' keys, jingling voices overlapping. I tried not to let it get to me. Tried to believe I was past that stage, past caring. But the truth is, sitting in that car with a half-eaten burger and the diploma I had no one to show, I felt invisible. When the knock came on my driver's side window, I nearly choked on my drink. My heart jumped, and I instinctively reached to lock the doors until I saw who it was. Principal Aidan Kapoor. Still in his ceremonial robes, maroon and gold trimmed the cap slightly tilted back like he'd just come from giving one of his polished speeches. I rolled the window down halfway, expecting maybe a reminder that loitering wasn't allowed or some well-meaning nudge to come back inside. Instead, he tilted his head and asked, "Mind if I join you?" I blinked. Sure, I said, though it came out more like a question. Before I could say anything else, he was already walking around the car. I scrambled to clear the seat, shoving my gown and trash into the back like I was hiding evidence. Sorry about the mess, I mumbled. I've seen worse, he said lightly as he folded his tall frame into the passenger seat, adjusting his robes with some difficulty. The teacher's lounge on exam week. You'd be shocked. It was strange sitting next to him like this. In 4 years, I'd only been in his office twice, once when I skipped math to finish a scholarship essay, and once when he told me I was valedictorian material if I stopped turning in assignments late. I never imagined him casually sitting in my car, letting the silence settle like old friends who didn't need to fill the gaps. He looked out through the windshield at the families still taking pictures. I noticed you weren't at the reception. I shrugged, chewing slowly. Didn't feel like celebrating. He nodded as if he understood more than I was saying. I spent my own graduation hiding in the library, he said after a pause. My parents were in the middle of a loud argument about who I'd be living with. It kind of sucked the magic out of the whole thing. I glanced at him, surprised. It was hard to imagine the always poised Mr. Kapoor in a vulnerable moment. But something about the way he said it casual without self-pity made me believe it. Still sucks, I muttered. It did, he agreed. But that day wasn't about them. And today, it's not really about who showed up or didn't. You made it, Aidan. You did the thing. I wanted to dismiss it, brush it off like I always did. But I didn't. Not yet. Guess it doesn't count if no one saw it, I said instead. Mr. Kapoor turned to look at me properly for the first time. His voice softened. What if I told you people did see it? They've been watching you try work stumble and still get up. Just because no one was in the stands cheering doesn't mean you weren't worth cheering for. I looked down at my hands. They were still trembling slightly from what I wasn't sure. Cold fries, adrenaline. Or maybe the realization that someone, anyone, had actually noticed I existed. I didn't have a response. Not yet, but I didn't feel quite so invisible anymore. We sat in silence for a few minutes after that. It wasn't awkward, not exactly. More like the kind of silence that fills the air when two people are thinking the same thing, but neither wants to say it first. Principal Kapoor looked out the window like he wasn't in a rush to be anywhere else. I picked at a limp French fry, unsure what to do with my hands. A few more families were leaving now, kids in gowns, laughing parents carrying flowers and balloons. I wondered what it felt like to be someone's reason to celebrate. I used to think being a principal meant keeping your distance, he said, finally adjusting his robes around his lap. You know, staying formal, leading from a step above. I glanced at him, not quite following. But the older I get, the more I realize sometimes leadership means sitting next to someone in their car when they're eating a cold burger after graduation. I huffed a breath that was almost a laugh. That, in the handbook somewhere, he smiled faintly. Page 642. Footnote. It was strange hearing him talk like this. For 4 years I had only seen him in the halls, straight-backed eyes focused, the type who never missed a dress code violation or a late assignment. We never talked beyond the occasional nod. To me, he'd always been distant, maybe even unreachable. You know, he said, not turning to look at me, when I called your name on that stage earlier, I looked for you in the crowd. You did. He nodded. I always look. But with you, it was different. I wanted to see your face. That caught me off guard. Why? He sighed and leaned his head back against the seat. 4 years ago, your middle school guidance counselor gave me a call. She told me about you. Said you'd been missing school, living in a rough home situation. That your grades were slipping, but you were smart, really smart. She said if someone didn't step in, you might not make it to high school, let alone graduation. I looked away quickly, trying to hide the sudden heat rising to my face. I remembered those days too clearly. Mom had started disappearing at night, and I never knew if she'd come back the next morning. My dad had left with a single duffel bag and a bank account in the negatives, and I'd been bouncing between couches, my friend Connor's basement, then a month on my brother's floor, until he told me I was too much. Ms. Morgan, I murmured, recalling the guidance counselor. Mr. Kapoor nodded. She believed in you. So we made a plan, quietly. A few teachers were looped in, nothing official, just eyes to keep watch. Ms. Dillon for math helped Coach O'Connell, made sure you had shower access during those weeks the apartment lost water. Miss Taylor gave you the key to the staff lounge when you had nowhere to sleep. My throat tightened. I remembered each of those things, but I had always chalked them up to luck or charity. I never realized they were connected, or that someone had orchestrated it behind the scenes. You were never invisible, Aidan, he said quietly. You were seen. Every single step. I didn't know what to say. No one had ever said that to me before. Not teachers, not family, not even friends. I'd built a life on being unnoticed, on surviving by fading into the background. And here was the principal of my school telling me I'd been watched the whole time by people who cared. It wasn't easy, I muttered, staring at my hands. I worked nights at that warehouse in Clarkson, tried to do homework on breaks, fell asleep in the school library more times than I can count. And yet here you are, he said simply. GPA 3.8, no suspensions, no excuses, just results. Doesn't feel like much now, I admitted. No one came. He paused. I came. I looked up and he was watching me, calm, steady, not pitying, just present. And I wasn't the only one, he added. They all signed the card. You'll see soon. Card. He reached into his robe and pulled out a thick envelope. Was supposed to be given at the reception, but I figured this was a better moment. I took it slowly, unsure what I was even holding. Inside was a folded graduation card covered in messages, some silly, some long and heartfelt. You made us proud. Keep pushing forward. Thanks for reminding us why we teach. Dozens of names, and tucked into the fold was a check. My breath caught. We heard about your partial scholarship to Sheridan, he said, his voice gentle. The staff chipped in to help cover your first semester books. It's not much, but it's something. It was everything. I didn't trust myself to speak. My eyes blurred, and I had to blink fast to keep from embarrassing myself. Mr. Kapoor checked his watch. They'll be wrapping up the reception soon. I should get back. He reached for the door but paused before opening it. People are shaped by those who show up, Aidan, not just by those who leave. Then he was gone. But his words stayed behind, echoing louder than the noise in the gym ever could. When Mr. Kapoor stepped out of my car and disappeared into the fading sunlight, I just sat there, still holding the envelope, still stunned. I must have read the card 5 times in a row, tracing the words with my thumb like they might disappear if I didn't keep touching them. Each signature was a name I knew, Ms. Taylor's swirly cursive, Coach O'Connell's bold blocky print, even Ms. Dillon's note written in 3 different ink colors like she ran out mid-sentence. These were people who had seen me sleep through lunch periods, walk into class with bags under my eyes, and wear the same hoodie for a week straight. And they hadn't judged me. They'd helped, quietly, steadily, without ever asking for anything back. I leaned my head against the seat and closed my eyes, memories surfacing one by one, moments I'd buried or brushed off. The night Ms. Dillon stayed 2 hours late to reteach me calculus because I'd missed the unit test while covering a double shift. The time coach let me use the gym showers when my apartment's water was shut off, never asking questions, just handing me a towel. And that week, during a snowstorm, when Ms. Taylor pressed a staff lounge key into my hand and whispered, "Just make sure you're gone by 6:30 a.m., I never thought of those moments as connected. I always believed I was just surviving, that they were random acts of kindness, lucky breaks. But now I realized someone had been coordinating, watching, making sure I didn't fall too far. I opened the glove compartment and placed the card inside beside the only other thing I kept there, a photo of me at age 9, smiling with both my parents at Center Island, back when things were still whole. I looked at their faces, my dad's hand resting on my shoulder, my mom's grin wide and easy, and I felt the usual hollow pang. But this time, it was followed by something else. Not anger, not sadness, gratitude. Because even though they hadn't shown up, others had. People I didn't share blood with, but who'd made room for me anyway. The check was still folded inside the card. I didn't even check the amount. It didn't matter. What mattered was that these teachers had thought of me, had cared enough to reach into their own pockets to help someone who in my mind had never stood out. My phone buzzed. A text from Connor. "Congrats, man. Sorry I couldn't make it. Family BBQ." I stared at the message for a long time. No anger, just a strange kind of acceptance. I used to crave that kind of recognition from friends, from family. Now I just felt tired of needing it, because maybe I'd been chasing the wrong people all along. I started the car but didn't put it in gear. My hands rested on the steering wheel as I looked out at the now empty parking lot. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It felt earned, like the stillness that comes after a long storm. I thought back to something Mr. Kapoor had said. People are shaped by those who show up, not just those who leave. And it landed differently now. For years I had measured my worth by who had walked away: my father, my brother, even my mother when she slipped into addiction. But that night I realized my story wasn't defined by absence. It was defined by presence. Quiet, consistent, often invisible, but real. I reached over and picked up the gown from the back seat, brushing off a few crumbs. It smelled like cafeteria pizza and gym floor polish. I folded it carefully and placed it in the trunk. I didn't know why, but it felt like something worth keeping. Then I looked at the card one last time before closing the glove box. "We're proud of you, Aidan. Keep going." I don't remember who wrote that line. It wasn't signed, but in a way it didn't matter. Because maybe it was all of them. Maybe it was the sum of every late-night tutoring session, every time someone turned a blind eye, so I could rest every moment of grace offered when what I needed most wasn't discipline, but compassion. I turned off the engine and sat back again. And for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of the past 4 years, not as a burden, but as a badge. I had made it. Not in the way most students did, with parties and photos and screaming families, but in a way that mattered just as much. No one had clapped for me when I crossed the stage, but the people who had truly been in my corner didn't need to clap. They just needed to be there. And they were. Maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought. Maybe I never had been. I must have sat in that parking lot for another 20 minutes, engine off, just breathing. The air had that soft golden hush that comes right before dusk in late June, when the heat finally begins to ease and the shadows stretch long across the pavement. The lot was almost empty now. Just a few leftover balloons floating in the breeze and a crumpled Tim Hortons cup rolling along the sidewalk. Everyone else had gone off to dinners, backyard parties, lakefront photos. Everyone but me. Well, me and the card in my glove box. I don't remember making the decision exactly. It wasn't some grand epiphany or a sudden surge of courage. It was quieter than that, like a whisper that said, "Go see for yourself." So I pulled out my phone, opened Google Maps, and typed in Donovan's Bistro. Mr. Kapoor had mentioned it before leaving. It wasn't far, maybe a 10-minute drive toward Lakeshore. The kind of place teachers might go to unwind, dim lights booths with cracking leather and the faint smell of onion rings and beer lingering in the air. I wasn't planning to go inside. Not really. I told myself I'd just drive by, see if I recognized anyone through the window. Maybe wave, maybe not even stop the car. I didn't want to intrude on their night. And if I'm honest, I wasn't sure I could walk in there without looking pathetic, like some lost kid trying to force his way into a space he hadn't earned. But I also couldn't ignore the soft pulse in my chest, something between fear and hope, that maybe, just maybe, they'd be happy to see me. The parking lot at Donovan's was nearly full when I pulled in. I circled twice before finding a spot near the back, my car squeezed between a dented SUV and a delivery truck. My hands were sweaty on the steering wheel. I could see shapes moving through the restaurant windows. Shadows of people talking, glasses raised occasional bursts of laughter. I spotted a familiar silhouette, Coach O'Connell, unmistakable, even in casual clothes, standing near the bar with a basket of fries in one hand. Then Ms. Dillon entered the frame, her long braids swinging behind her, laughing at something he said. For a moment, I almost put the car in reverse. Almost drove off. What was I thinking? I didn't belong in there. This was their world. I was just some student they helped survive. Nothing more. But then I saw her, Ms. Taylor. She was holding the door open for someone else, her heels long gone, replaced with the same gray New Balance sneakers she wore during exam week. She was looking out, scanning the parking lot casually, not expecting anything. Not hoping. Just there. I didn't even realize I was opening my door until my feet were on the pavement. I grabbed my graduation cap from the back seat, the same one I'd tossed aside earlier, now a little crumpled. I didn't put it on, just held it, as a kind of anchor maybe. A reminder that I had crossed that stage, even if no one had clapped. As I approached the restaurant, heart-pounding, Ms. Taylor noticed me. Her eyes widened, and then she smiled, wide, genuine, no trace of surprise. Like I was exactly who she'd been hoping to see all along. "Aidan," she called out, waving me over like I was a regular, and not the loner kid from room 234 who used to fall asleep during lunchtime. And just like that, the door wasn't a barrier anymore. It was an invitation. Inside, the place was warm and noisy and filled with the smell of fried food and familiarity. The staff had pushed a few tables together in the corner where nearly a dozen teachers sat eating nachos and reminiscing about past students. I froze for a second in the entryway, but Ms. Taylor's hand was already on my shoulder, steering me in. Coach O'Connell turned around and grinned. "There he is, Mr. GPA 3.8. Ms. Dillon waved me over to an empty seat between her and Mr. Green from Social Studies. "We saved you a chair," she said, like it had never been a question. For a moment I didn't speak. I just looked around the table at the faces that had been in the background of my story for so long. And now here they were, front and center. People who had made space for me when I didn't even know how to ask for it. People who had shown up. I finally sat down, the graduation cap still in my hands. Principal Kapoor nodded at me from across the table. Nothing dramatic. Just a small nod. But it felt like a full conversation. "You came. You're seen. You're home." As fries were passed around and someone ordered another round of ginger ales and ciders, I felt something shift deep inside, like a knot loosening in my chest, like the weight of 4 years of hiding, surviving, enduring, finally being acknowledged. No, I hadn't had the kind of graduation other people had. No parents with signs, no photos in the backyard, no envelopes stuffed with money. But I had something else. I had this table. I had these faces. I had a room full of people who had quietly, stubbornly believed in me. And for the first time, I wasn't looking at what I'd lost. I was starting to see what I'd found. I never knew a basket of onion rings could feel like a welcome home party. But that's what it was. Greasy golden rings passed to me across a crowded table, followed by someone sliding a cold ginger ale into my hand like it had been waiting for me all evening. I didn't say much at first, just listened. Let the sound of laughter and clinking glasses wash over me like music I hadn't heard in years. It was strange and comforting being around people who used to feel like part of the system teachers' authority figures, and now realizing they were just people. People who cared. Ms. Taylor was the first to bring up memories. "You remember that essay you wrote about the hydro towers behind your apartment, Aidan?" she said, turning toward me. "I kept a copy of it. You made electricity sound poetic." I blinked. "You kept it?" "Of course," she said. "I read it at a staff meeting once. Made half the room cry." I looked down, unsure how to respond. That essay had been written at 3 a.m. on the floor of a borrowed basement surrounded by laundry piles and flickering Christmas lights. I never thought it mattered to anyone but me. Coach O'Connell chimed in next. "You were the only kid who ever helped stack chairs after assemblies without being asked. I used to call you the quiet workhorse. I thought you just didn't want me to get caught sleeping in the bleachers," I joked. He chuckled. "That too." Bit by bit the stories came out. Ms. Dillon remembered how I once brought her a coffee during exam week. "You paid with change," she said, smiling. "Mostly nickels and dimes, but it was the best coffee I had that year." Even Mr. Green, who had barely spoken 2 words to me in class, leaned forward and said, "You never interrupted. You just listened. That's rare, you know." I looked around the table, trying to wrap my head around what I was hearing. These weren't empty compliments. These were observations. Proof that even when I thought I'd been invisible, people had noticed. Not the flashy stuff, not grades or speeches, just the quiet ways I had shown up day after day. Principal Kapoor raised his glass, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to get everyone's attention. "Here's to the students we almost lost," he said, looking at me. "And the ones we never gave up on." There was no need for applause, no big toast, just a few nods, a few murmurs of "hear, hear." But in that moment, something inside me cracked open, not in a painful way, more like a shell breaking. I felt my throat tighten and looked down, pretending to take a sip. I wasn't ready to let them see how much it meant to me. How deeply it mattered to be seen not just as a student who made it to graduation, but as a person who mattered along the way. Someone handed me a Sharpie. "Write your name on the table, Ms." Dillon said, pointing to the wooden beam running beneath the tabletop. I leaned down and saw dozens of names scrawled there in different colors and styles, students, teachers, years written beside each. Some I recognized. Most I didn't. But they all shared one thing: they had been here. They had mattered. I hesitated. "You sure?" Ms. Taylor smiled. "You've earned it." So I bent down and wrote Aidan Miller, PCSS class of 25. When I straightened back up, the knot in my chest had loosened. My name was no longer just on a diploma or buried in a report card. It was carved into a memory, into a place where I had been known. The conversation turned to other graduates, other stories. They talked about a kid who'd gone on to be a nurse, another who now worked in the mayor's office. I listened, wondering where I fit into that world. Was I just a name on a table? Or could I be something more before we left Ms. Taylor slid a napkin across the table to me. On it was a list scholarship, links a note about a book grant, and the name of a student support advisor at Sheridan who owed her a favor. "Just in case," she said. "Thanks," I whispered. "No need," she replied. "We're not done rooting for you." As we stood to leave, I looked back at the table one last time. The onion rings were gone, the drinks half empty. But what stayed with me wasn't what we'd eaten or said, it was the feeling, the knowing. That maybe the family I'd wanted my whole life had been waiting for me in a place I never thought to look. I walked out with the others into the warm Mississauga night. The streets were quiet, headlights flickering past. I held the napkin in one hand and my cap in the other, like both could carry me forward. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was leaving something behind. I felt like I was stepping into something real. We lingered outside Donovan's for a while after settling the bill, no one really in a rush to leave. The air had cooled, the kind of cool that only early summer evenings in Mississauga could offer, just enough to make you feel awake, but not enough to chase you indoors. Someone joked about getting dessert at Dairy Queen, and someone else laughed that they were too old to be eating sundaes at 10 p.m. But the group didn't scatter right away. They stood around chatting in smaller circles, the way old friends do when they know the night's almost over but don't want to say goodbye yet. I found myself leaning against the brick wall near the side entrance, sipping the last of my ginger ale. That's when Ms. Dillon walked over, 2 takeout containers in hand. Leftovers for Mr. Kapoor's twins, she explained. They're going through a mac and cheese phase. She handed me one of the containers anyway. This one's for you. Tomorrow's fuel. I laughed quietly. Thanks. You don't have to, I know, she said, cutting me off gently. That's why I did. She didn't walk away, just leaned beside me, looking out at the others. You know I was the first in my family to graduate, she said suddenly. Not just high school, anything. I turned to look at her. My dad ran a corner store in Brampton, worked 12 hours a day. My mom cleaned offices downtown. They didn't have time to help me with homework or come to parent-teacher nights, but they made sure I had dinner, and shoes, and enough quiet after 9 p.m. to study. I stayed quiet. Her tone wasn't sad, just matter-of-fact, like she was peeling back a layer and showing me the human underneath the teacher's blazer. I nearly quit university my second year, she continued. Felt too far from home, like I didn't belong. Then one day a prof pulled me aside and said, "You're not here because of luck. You're here because someone saw something in you and they weren't wrong." I swallowed hard. The words hit close. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. She smiled. "Because I know what it feels like to sit in a classroom and wonder if anyone sees you." "I see you, Aidan. We all do. That's why we kept showing up." Just then, Ms. Taylor and Coach O'Connell joined us, carrying their own takeout bags and jackets slung over their arms. The conversation turned casual again, light. Coach told a story about accidentally wearing 2 different shoes to parent night. Ms. Taylor confessed she once called a student by the wrong name for 3 months and no one corrected her. And I laughed, really laughed. That's when it hit me, these people weren't just educators. They weren't just roles. They were whole human beings, with stories, with failures and cracks and messy pasts. And still they had chosen to stand beside kids like me. Not because they had to, but because someone once did it for them. I looked at Coach, remembering how he let me use the gym showers during that rough winter. I'd always assumed he was just being kind, but now I saw something else, empathy born from experience. "You ever have a student sleep in the locker room before?" I asked him, curious. He nodded slowly. "You weren't the first. Probably won't be the last. But you were the only one who folded the towel after." That made the others laugh. I flushed, but I didn't mind. There was no mockery in it, just warmth. I used to think surviving meant being invisible. I admitted more to myself than anyone else. "Keep your head down. Don't make waves. Don't need anyone." Ms. Taylor rested a hand on my arm. "But surviving isn't living, Aidan, and needing people doesn't make you weak." I nodded, absorbing that truth like sunlight after a long winter. Coach checked his watch. "We better head out. Some of us have summer school in the morning. Some of us are retired," Ms. Taylor teased, nudging him. Before we parted, Principal Kapoor reappeared from the front of the restaurant. He'd been walking someone to their car. When he saw us gathered near the wall, he came over looking satisfied. "I meant what I said earlier," he told me, "about the mentorship program. Sheridan has a pilot initiative for first-gen students, weekly check-ins, guidance, small bursary support." I blinked. "You think I'd qualify?" He smiled. Aidan, I think you were born to defy every statistic they ever put in front of you. My chest tightened. Again. But this time I didn't look down. I met his gaze and nodded. Okay, let's do it. We said our goodbyes, hugs, and handshakes, and see you soons. As I walked back to my car, I glanced at the container in my hand, still warm. A small kindness, but real. A reminder. That night, I didn't go back to my apartment. I drove to Jack Darling Park and sat by the lake listening to the water lapping against the shore. The lights of Mississauga shimmered behind me, and for the first time in a long while, I let myself dream without fear, without shame, not just of surviving, but of becoming someone who could show up for others, the way they showed up for me. I didn't go straight home that night. Couldn't really. Something inside me needed time to settle, like snow swirling in a jar that had finally been shaken too hard. I ended up parked at Jack Darling Memorial Park, the lake stretching out in front of me like a calm exhale. I rolled down the windows, let the night air seep in. The leftover mac and cheese Ms. Dillon had given me sat on the passenger seat untouched. My graduation cap was back there too, resting awkwardly on top of my old hoodie and a half-used bottle of windshield washer fluid. It looked out of place, almost like it belonged to someone else. Except now I wasn't so sure. For weeks, no years, I'd treated that cap like a costume, something I'd wear for a moment just to go through the motions. I never imagined I'd keep it. But tonight I kept glancing at it in the rearview mirror like it was trying to tell me something. I reached back, grabbed it gently, and placed it on the passenger seat. This time, carefully. The quiet of the lake pulled memories out of me. Not loud ones, just small flickers, like when I first started sleeping in the library because it was the only warm place that didn't smell like mold, or the time I skipped a midterm because I had to work a double shift and Ms. Dillon gave me a second chance without asking why. I remembered how I used to lie to people. My mom's working late, my brother's picking me up, I forgot my key, because telling the truth felt heavier than I could carry. But tonight, there was no one to lie to. Just the lake. Just me. Just the truth. And the truth was, I made it. Not because I had everything figured out. Not because I had a support system in the traditional sense. But because I kept going. Because every time life tried to make me disappear, someone, a teacher, a janitor, a principal, didn't let me fade. I pulled out my phone. It was almost midnight. My notifications were quiet, except for one text. Ms. Taylor. Thanks for showing up, Aidan. We're proud of you. Really. I didn't reply right away. I just stared at the screen, reading those words over and over like a lullaby. Eventually, I opened my email instead. For a long time, I'd kept a folder labeled college stuff, filled with half-completed forms, scholarship links I didn't think I had a shot at, and essays I never submitted. That night, I started a new email. A real one. Subject line, "Thank you for showing up, recipients. Ms. Dillon, Coach O'Connell. Ms. Taylor, Mr. Green, Principal Kapoor." I didn't overthink the message. I just wrote what I felt. I used to think no one saw me, that surviving meant staying invisible. But you all showed me I was wrong. You showed up when I didn't know how to ask, when I didn't even know I needed it. I don't have the right words, but I have gratitude. And I have a plan now. Thank you for seeing me. For everything. I hit send before I could chicken out. Then I sat there, the screen dimming in my lap, the lake whispering in the background, and something inside me finally let go. I didn't cry exactly, but I breathed in deep and exhaled something that had been lodged in my chest for years. Guilt, shame, fear. They didn't disappear, but they loosened. When I got home, the hallway light in the apartment flickered as usual. The neighbor's dog barked twice behind the wall. I climbed the stairs quietly, unlocked the door, and stepped into the one bedroom I shared with no one. I placed the mac and cheese in the fridge and the cap on top of the bookshelf where I could see it. Not as decoration, as a reminder. A reminder that I had done something hard and that it mattered. The next morning I set my alarm early. I ironed the one collared shirt I owned, printed out the scholarship list Ms. Taylor had scribbled on that napkin, and took the bus to Sheridan College. I didn't have an appointment. I just showed up at the student support office and said, "I'm Aidan. I think I'm supposed to be here." The woman behind the desk smiled. "Yes, you are." By the time I left, I had an application folder, a timeline, and a mentor name, Samir Patel. I also had something else, momentum. That night, I walked past the mirror in my hallway and caught my reflection holding a highlighter and a folder full of possibility. I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. Because I was finally starting to recognize the guy looking back. And for the first time, he didn't look like a survivor. He looked like someone who was becoming. 3 months later, I walked into my first day at Sheridan College with a backpack that didn't creak when I zipped it a notebook that hadn't been salvaged from the back of a recycling bin, and a quiet steadiness in my chest. I didn't recognize it first until I realized it was something dangerously close to hope. The Hazel McCallion campus buzzed with September energy late registrations, oversized coffee cups, students standing outside buildings trying to look like they belonged. I clutched my class schedule and followed the signage toward my first lecture. Inside the building, everything smelled like new carpet and ambition. I wasn't sure what I expected walking into that room. Maybe to feel small again. Maybe to feel like I was faking it. But when I stepped through the door and took my seat, something shifted. I didn't feel like I was trespassing anymore. I felt ready. A few rows ahead of me, someone raised their hand and introduced themselves as a first-generation college student. The professor welcomed them. No fanfare, just recognition. That quiet kind of belonging that didn't need to be shouted to feel real. At break, I pulled out the card for my port credit teachers. I'd slipped it into my binder just behind the class syllabus, not because I needed the messages anymore, but because I wanted to remember how I got here. My phone buzzed. A new email from Principal Kapoor, just checking in. "How's day one? Proud of you already. RK." I smiled. I didn't need to respond right away. Just knowing someone remembered was enough. After class, I found the student support office and introduced myself to Samir Patel, my assigned mentor. He had a quick smile, too many tabs open on his computer, and a framed photo of his mom by the desk. "Welcome to Sheridan, Aidan," he said, shaking my hand. "Let's build something." That phrase stuck with me. Let's build something. That evening, I took the bus back home, the golden hour light flickering between apartment buildings as the sun dipped behind the towers. When I got in, I placed my notebook on the kitchen table, poured myself a glass of water, and opened my laptop. I remembered a line Ms. Taylor had once said, "We don't just teach subjects, we show students how to keep going." That night, I started a simple blog. Nothing fancy. Just a plain title, "The Quiet Ones Who Keep Going." I wrote about the week I lived in the staff lounge, about the extra portions from the cafeteria, about the time Coach let me sleep in the locker room without saying a word. I didn't name names. I didn't have to. The point wasn't exposure. It was gratitude. I clicked publish and turned off the screen. The next morning, I received 2 comments. One from a reader named Miss T25 that simply said, "You were never invisible. Thanks for sharing this." The second was from a student at a different college. I thought I was the only one who didn't have anyone at graduation. Reading this made me feel less alone. Thanks, Aidan. That one stayed with me. In the weeks that followed, I found myself volunteering with the college's peer mentorship program. At first, I just sat in on sessions. Then I started helping lead them, talking to students who were balancing jobs and classes, who thought maybe they weren't cut out for post-secondary, who were still hiding parts of their stories because shame is heavy and silence feels safer. And every time I told them I've been there, I meant it. Because I had. One Friday afternoon, after leading a workshop, I got caught in a downpour on the way home. Soaked through shoes squeaking, I ducked into a Tim Hortons and ordered a hot chocolate. I took a seat near the back and pulled out my binder. A woman sat down at the table next to mine, early 30s, kind eyes, toddler in tow. She glanced over and smiled. "You a student?" "Yeah," I said, "Sheridan. Just started this fall." She nodded. "Good for you." Her daughter spilled some of her drink, and I reached over a few napkins without thinking. The woman looked at me. "You remind me of my younger brother. He's trying to get back into school too. Had a tough few years." I hesitated, then said, "Tell him not to give up. Sometimes all it takes is one person who sees you." She smiled. Thanks. I'll tell him. Later, as I walked home, drenched but strangely light, I realized something. The family I thought I'd never have, that warm, unwavering presence in my life, had existed all along. Just not in the form I expected. It came in the shape of teachers who bent the rules, a principal who noticed when I disappeared, and mentors who said, "Let's build something." I used to think the people who left me had shaped me. But now I knew the truth. I was shaped by the ones who stayed. By the family I got to choose. There are moments in life when we truly believe we're walking alone, when it seems like no one sees us, hears us, or understands how hard it's been just to keep going. But Aidan Miller's story gently reminds us that we are often held by the quiet presence of those who choose to show up, the teachers who stay late, the mentors who listen without judgment, the people who see potential when all we feel is exhaustion. These chosen families, though not bound by blood, can become the pillars that shape us, support us, and remind us of our worth. For older viewers, parents, educators, community mentors, Aidan's journey offers a powerful reflection. Your presence matters deeply. A simple act of kindness, a word of encouragement, or a decision to pay attention can ripple through someone's life in ways you may never fully see. You don't have to fix everything. Sometimes just showing up is enough. If this story spoke to something in your heart, feel free to leave a comment below. You never know your story. Your presence might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Thank you for staying with us through the journey.